Welcome to the CPA Intelligence and Ethics Show. My name is Garth Sheriff. I am currently recording this, believe it or not, in a closet at a hotel. I'm at the Digital CPA Conference at the National Harbor. It's been a fantastic conference, and just for sound quality, I put myself into this very small space to make sure that the quality is good for you as I record this somewhat ad hoc, but also with a lot of energy. I think this conference has been really great. Fits very well into the theme of this podcast, which I do need to record more regularly compared to the other podcasts that I do, which is the Fraud Complex. And the reason I wanted to record an episode here at the Digital CPA Conference, because it does intersect the areas that this podcast is focused on, and also what I do, ethics and artificial intelligence. And those words have come up over and over again in this conference. And I come into this conference as someone who does a lot of playing and exploring with all the tools that come out from OpenAI or Anthropic. And even then, I still have FOMO, fear of missing out, and I deliver training to firms to help them be in that collaborative space so that when they're thinking about sharing ideas and prompts and automations, aka agents, that there's a real understanding of those who might have some resistance or lack of fluidity with the technology to those that have more of that excitement and they play with this technology, that those two sides can work together. It's actually quite good for creativity, unless one side doesn't know what the other's thinking, makes assumptions, and then maybe one person feels like anybody who uses this is cheating. The other person who wants to use these tools, these large language models or other AI solutions, they don't want to share, and it creates this invisible barrier and a lack of transparency. So what I wanted to do in this, I guess it's an emergency pod. I'm not sure. I am recording this in a closet, so I think it qualifies that way because that's generally not my recording studio operations. But I wanted to just give some of the flavors of what I've heard here, I think for the CPA audience, also the professional audience. And I think one of the best keynotes I've heard in a while around artificial intelligence was Zach Cass. And his particular keynote was, to me, very different. He is, of course, quite well known because he's the former head of go-to-market at OpenAI. So he knows a lot. Now he's a global AI advisor. He advises a lot of top companies in terms of AI deployment and how they should look at AI. But what I was interested in with his keynote, which I thought was amazing, I sometimes watch these keynotes as someone who gives keynotes, and sometimes I watch it more for what is he doing really well as a keynote speaker? What's his approach and what's his vibe? What's his style? And I thought he had an amazing style, and he was there for an hour. It's a long keynote, and he was captivating. To the point of this podcast, what was the commentary that he provided? And a lot of it I thought was different in the sense that he wasn't getting too much into the weeds of what's happening in agents and what OpenAI is doing versus Google and Gemini, Anthropic. I thought he came at this with the most positive view of AI I've seen in a while, because AI sometimes does not get that positive view. And it's hard to say, is this beneficial for the CPA profession? We get worried about job loss and redundancy and fear of missing out. What does this actually mean? There's a lot of uncertainty, and CPAs and other professionals don't always deal well with uncertainty. But Zach was a breath of fresh air in the sense that he had a very positive and a very good narrative hook into why this technology is going to be helpful. He did acknowledge some of the challenges of the technology, but a lot of this was around the ability to commoditize things so that the things that we take for granted as easy for certain people and professionals, which is easy because we learn how to do them, but not necessarily the spaces in which we use a lot of our intelligence and intellect, but also create barriers for those that should have free access to them. Like one of those would be accounting, right? Accounting information. One of the challenges is, yes, accounting information takes a lot of knowledge to build financial statements, but financial literacy is needed by everyone. And that dichotomy has always been a challenge. And his approach would be like, well, listen, AI is going to help financial literacy. And that's going to help you because you want to, he didn't say this. This is one of the interpretations I had of his keynote. If everyone improves their financial literacy, it doesn't mean you're out of a job. It means you're in a better position to communicate with people and help them understand their business and their decision-making and strategy. And he looked at it as this is a technology, one, that's unstoppable. And in that way, it's as much as you might want it to go away or feel like it's flawed in a way it's being rolled out by, let's say, OpenAI, it's just moving forward at speeds that are unprecedented in technology. And so I liked his messaging around this. That one of the anecdotes I'll use from his father, who was an oncologist, and he discussed that his father's older. I had a particular phrasing for his father that he was very funny too. I thought it was really funny. And he looked at AI as saying, like, as an older oncologist, someone who works with cancer patients, some of the skill sets might start to diminish as you age. But with AI, the parts that don't diminish with age, that actually get accentuated, your ability to have seen all the things that happen in his line of work, to problem solve, to support, to encourage, to coach, to mentor, patient care, bedside manners, those all get pushed forward because other things get taken away from AI that may have not allowed for those spaces to happen in the medical profession. And that was just one of many examples of him looking at AI as something that will allow more communication, more collaboration, more community, which is not always the narrative, that AI will break apart community and move people against each other in some ways. And he actually made an interesting and compelling argument. That's sometimes the nature of the technology like the internet, that there is this unknowable thing that when you go out there, you have anonymity. And in that anonymity, people act, and a small group of people act in that space as bad actors. And in AI, you'll have bad actors that will do bad things with the technology, but that doesn't necessarily mean the entire technology has ramifications that are negative. I just thought it was a really good keynote. He was funny. I sent him a message on LinkedIn actually, because he had a great funny line about Candy Crush, which I don't want to. I'll do it an injustice by trying to do a version of it here on this podcast, but I thought it was very funny. And I sent him a message to say that was fire. He said, thanks. I thought that was fantastic. So that's been very much consistent, I think, with me. I think if you do have a very pessimistic world-ending view of generative AI, large language models, I think you won't move forward with what is happening. And maybe finding ways to use this for good, use it to promote our professional judgment and our critical thinking. And that's the biggest thing. We got to move forward. We got to play and explore this technology and also understand what it's doing to culture. And that was a consistent message. I think this conference has been amazing for that. Because, yeah, you can get into the weeds, GPTs and agents, and should you know Python? I always think, sure, that's good for a conference, but I think a lot of it, we're saying in the profession, in a lot of professions, are we all sort of seeing this together? Are we seeing the same thing? And if you listen to these keynote speeches, and I know this is a monumental change to the profession. It's not even a subject for commentary. And it is the biggest change, transformational technology that we've ever seen, because it's coming for a critical thinking space. And I think the more we as a profession hear that, the more we'll be open to saying, okay, we got to play with these tools. Now there's high risk and low risk playing, where you play with these tools not having played with them before, and then you use it in a high leverage situation. That's not good. And that's going to compromise some of the values that people have in CPAs, the ethics and integrity. But just getting people into a comfort zone of saying, this technology is here, we can play with it. And I thought that was a really good look at that. And there was another keynote that I thought was really interesting, and it's David Figueri. There was several people that came into a roundtable, and it was actually hosted by Pascal Finette. I mentioned David, but I'll come back to him. Pascal, chief heretic at Radical. I like his LinkedIn bio. And yeah, well-known public speaker, speaks in the space. But in this morning session, he was really facilitating other people in our industry. And I like that setup, because what this conference, I think, has been, I'm promoting this conference, hopefully. Maybe they'll recognize that or not. I think this conference has been very good. I think there needs to be more conferences that are going into the specialization of what a profession is. So if it's a law conference and you're going into this particular type of law that someone practices and where AI is relevant. And I thought that was a big part of this, is that I felt very talked to as a CPA with other CPAs, even drilling down into service line that I speak a lot to, which is audit and assurance. And so Pascal facilitated this session, and I thought David, who is at EisnerAmper, talked about what's happening, his view as chief AI architect at EisnerAmper, one of the largest firms in the US, how he sees this. And again, what was interesting is I thought there was a consistency in message. This is here. It is moving forward. We need to look at it and say, where can we use this? What can we use it for? How can it help us? And I thought that particular message was really crystallized by Jen Leary, the CEO of CLA, one of the largest CPA firms in the US. And I get this question a lot. So I appreciated her saying this and bringing it up. Like, what's the ROI on AI? Like, when I come into workshops and deliver programs on AI, it's really a cultural question. And I actually raised this point. She raised it she's a fairly significant person in this space, given that she's the CEO of one of the major firms in the US. But it's a similar theme. ROI topic sometimes is about chasing rainbows. Like, if I use agents, I can save 10x, 100x of money or do this or that. And I also have the same feeling. Don't chase rainbows. And what she said is what I've always thought about this. When you talk about, let's just say not a firm as large as CLA, but a smaller firm, work on using AI for the right problem. What are the problems that your firm, specifically your firm, your organization, your people face? And start just small scale trying out different ways in which a large language model that's approved under your AI policy can help to solve it. And it may or may not, but you're learning. So there's always a benefit to trying. But when people chase these rainbows, they can be disappointed. They can also not even try because there's these big problems that are so large, maybe even sometimes so esoteric that some people just throw out the AI and go, oh, it's not here yet. No, it's here. It's amazing stuff. But it's about scaling your problems, understanding the problems that you're facing. And that's something I do when I go to CPA firms. And I'm like, what is your problems? And it's not for me to tell you. A lot of times people ask me, give me the top 10 ways in which this organization or that organization is using a ChatGPT, a Gemini, a Copilot. I'm like, it doesn't matter. This is for you and your organization and your risk appetite and your clients. You have to like scope out the problems. It's almost like creative problem solving, the ABCs, analyze, brainstorm, and conclude. You have to know what your problem is. There's always something called the slow elevator problem, in which you give a problem that says, hey, there's a slow elevator and there's a bunch of solutions. And some of those solutions can be really big, like, hey, redesign the elevator, put magnetic levitation on them. But what if it's not that the elevator's slow, but the elevator experience is boring and tedious? Then it's other solutions, maybe smaller, put mirrors, put up music. And you have to know what problem you're facing before you start thinking about these tools, and then you have to play with them. And I thought Jen really articulated that very interestingly. And then the other person I want to mention is Aaron Harris, the CTO of Sage, very important for the accounting world. What I thought was interesting about his key takeaways for CPAs out there, he said, one, assurance is about to explode. Now, this doesn't mean audits of financial statements necessarily, but people will want more assurances about the workflows and where AI is being involved in. And that could involve, of course, CPAs, because we do that very well. I thought that was a positive part to the CPA profession, because again, accountancy and accounting is now a discussion about a profession that is under threat from AI, which is, our profession hasn't been under threat this way from a technology, I don't think, ever. And I think it's a legitimate threat. I do. And I think it's going to be a reorientation of how we look at work and how we look at our jobs. But I thought that was a way in which opportunities may present themselves in the ways that we kind of see ourselves not having to do certain tasks and maybe take up 50 or 60% of our time. What are we going to do with the time that we have? And hopefully it's more deep thinking, deep reasoning, and more of what we do, provide confidence, integrity, and give people trust in the things that they use to rely on for decision making. So I thought that was really good. He also gave a little bit he did phrase it this way, like it's self-serving. He's the CTO. He thinks the CTO position is going to be really important. Pascal, who was moderating these other speakers, also, I thought, mentioned, Pascal Finette, always invite AI to the table. I thought that was a really good quote. That means invite AI to the table. Doesn't mean they have to stay at the table. Doesn't mean they have to eat all their food, but bring AI in. Dinner guests, see what happens. I think that's an interesting metaphor and parable to like play with this technology, play with it all the time, play with it in your personal life, play with it at work under the parameters of your organization and what their AI policies are. The word play is really important. It's when you play, you don't exploit. It's the beginner's mind. It's explorer's mind. You're not looking to say, if I got to do this now, or I can't get this job done. That's exploiting. And when you exploit, you tend to close down your divergent thinking, go into convergent thinking, and that can be really risky. When you play, you're full of ideas. You're like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't. And I think that was a consistent part of the sessions that I went to. And I think the overall theme of this conference, they also said, be the human in the room. And that's something that's typically said, and sometimes you can look at that somewhat cynically, like, all right, well, be the human in the room, but just to say that, don't worry, your job's going to be safe, because you're going to have to always be this barrier between what a large language model outputs and maybe the way it goes out into the world. And that one, you have to think about your role, and it's possible the human in the room disappears in certain spaces. But for a lot of the CPA profession, there is this level of human trust that we trust that before this thing moves into the space of public knowledge or a recommendation or a report or a tax return, there's someone human. We still like human beings. I like that message as well. And so being here at this conference, I think some really key themes appear to me, and they're high-level themes to me. They're themes of leveraging the technology, but to me, I think the biggest part of this, and I'm hearing this throughout the conference, is culture and ethics. It is a space right now, and I know this because I train CPAs at different firms and different organizations across the country. There is a sense of, I don't know if I want to share this. I don't know if I want to let people know that I can really do some really cool stuff. And this is really happening in the middle side of organizations and maybe the younger generation. They're coming in from college or university. They're looking for more meaningfulness. Do they really want to do more sampling and more data entry when that stuff should all eventually go to AI? They want to do problem solving. They want to be excited about what they do. But there are generational gaps here where those, and it's not explicitly said, like a partner or somebody might not say explicitly, hey, AI is very limited in its use at our firm. We don't trust it. But the vibe is there. You know how a vibe is. And that's really felt by a generation that doesn't have that same vibe. They feel like this is awesome or interesting or fun, or I want to turn to it first. Now, you can see where you can marry the two. A CPA that has risk averseness, wanting to put a little bit of a black hat onto certain things, but with information that is presented in the open by somebody who may be more junior that has ideas. That's a great marriage. Here's the idea. I'm new to the profession, but I got this idea and that idea. And you're like, that's really great. That's what you want to do. But you want to maybe slow the roll a little bit because you might think, well, we have to think about privacy. We got to disclose to the client. That's the type of conversation. What's happening to me, and I see this, truly see this, I've told other people this, it's that these conversations aren't happening. There's an assumption that prompts are being used in the way the firm likes, or the Copilot, no ChatGPT, or ChatGPT for this and not for that. I'm telling you, that's not what's happening. Because those that know that Gemini and ChatGPT are the best large language models out there to do everything and anything. Copilot uses the most latest version of ChatGPT generally, but it's limited because it's housed by Windows and Microsoft, and they're not going to let it do carte blanche as much as OpenAI's ChatGPT. And if you come from college or university, you will always choose a Gemini or a ChatGPT over anything else because they are the best models there are right now. And then there are others as well, but the ones that just answer your prompt. You don't want to know. You don't want an extra prompt to get a prompt. One prompt, answer it, I'll refine it. That's good. That's speed and interest and excitement and divergent thinking. But of course, that does run sometimes antithetical to a CPA firm. And so this sort of, I think, contrast is playing out a little bit. And what we really want to see, and this is part of what I do, but also part of this podcast, if you're at the leadership side of things, make it feel safe for people to talk about this and share prompts and take risks. Yes, obviously there are red line risks that if somebody takes and does something completely unethical or offside, they have to deal with that consequence. But there are going to be mistakes that are going to be made in doing certain things around client service and CPA firms that are teachable moments, that are moments for the organization to learn that will make them better as an organization and culture as this technology moves forward. You don't want to have silos of partners and managers and seniors and staff and whatever the hierarchy of an organization that you're at kind of work separately and understand AI separately or withhold information or not use things. You want people, if you find a very motivated, excited AI individual who's an auditor or a tax person, that's gold because they're excited. I want to use this. You might be a little scared because are they thinking about some of the brakes that they, it's really a gas brake thing. There could be the person who wants to put the gas pedal down on all of this at your organization. And there's a lot of value there. And there's a person who wants to hit the brakes and just stop the speed of this. But both of those together in a safe, psychologically safe, collaborative environment, I think is a really important part of moving forward as an organization. I think that's been a theme of this particular conference, which I think has been amazing. The networking, this community around this in terms of CPAs, looking at this, I mean, be honest with you, there is going to be job loss. And I think that it's hard to sometimes spin as don't worry, the job loss will just result in you using your deep reasoning and critical thinking skills more, possibly, right? I mean, there is so much uncertainty here. It's going to create anxiety. Do I have anxiety? Absolutely. Do I think about education and how I do my job in delivering content and education? Could AI do my job? Could AI take over education and professional development and professional education? And do you really need a live person to do this? But I have to still move forward with this. I still have to play with it. And what's more important, to let the anxiety sort of spin you to not moving and playing, or trying to say, I don't know if job loss is going to happen at scale that some people say. I don't know if there's going to be a complete reimagining of every facet of what a CPA does or other professional. There's just question marks. If you read the tea leaves, it looks like there's going to be a lot of change for a lot of professions that were pretty change proof. The CPA profession is pretty good. One of the things that Jennifer Woods, who is I believe the CEO of one of the lead partners at Bonadeo Group, another large CPA firm, talked about is something I'd say is that if you went back to when I started in the profession in, let's say, 1997, which is the year, and you kind of look at what is done in the service line that I worked in, which is audits. If you took me in a time machine from 1997 to 2025, what would be my experience? I would be like, whoa, there's phones that you can do video calls, and of course there'd be a technological shock to something. But if I looked at the very core of what an audit is, like what they're doing, I'd be like, I know this. I mean, in 1997, I didn't know very well. It was an intern. Follow along here. I would be able to say, yeah, I do this. I send confirmations. I used to send it via mailing it like snail mail, but you do it with a confirmations.com or a third party. And I wouldn't be so out of touch with the methodology, which is kind of crazy. I should be. If you took a 1997 me, or even a 1987, not me, because at that point I'm very young, but a CPA from 1987 or 1977, I even go back to like the 50s. And you brought them forward in time, and this is specific to audit, and you look fundamentally at what an audit is and how it's executed in terms of just the core procedures, not the technology surrounding it. They'd be like, yeah, all this like computer stuff and cloud computing and whatever, I don't understand that, but I know what you're doing. You're sampling. I sampled in 1950. 1960s auditors will say, I sampled. They might have used pen and paper, and it's not on the harping on sampling. It's just our profession has had some luxury in keeping sort of the structural part of our jobs and the way we've done it as a thing we could have passed forward to generation. And a lot of the core of it, and that's why we have this acronym called SALI, same as last year, is the same. That's fundamentally going to change. And how you see that change could be, my gosh, everything that I've kind of learned and we're going to pass forward and what's going to carry me for the next few years, that's not going to be as available to me. But the other part to it, if you're going to spin it more positively like Zach did, is that this will create more opportunity to do the things that maybe is more meaningful, which is a lot of what the younger generation wants. And to be honest with you, I think every generation should want more connection with their job, more connection with people. Maybe it does do the thing that Zach, I think, really fundamentally said, is that it's going to do the opposite of what you might think. If we remove the bad actors in the space of AI, it's going to bring people together. And that was a positive view of it. Again, we'll have to see how this all plays out. But the idea is we take away some of the systematic tasks and things that don't challenge us, don't necessarily need us to communicate. What are we left with? The things that AI can't do, which is really the communication piece, the collaborative piece, the parts of the human brain that AI can't really yet do. And it's always like, there's always these little disclaimers I have to have for this, because I'm saying yet. We'll see. Like there has been Anthropic, I believe, said we're going to be at AGI very soon. And again, I might have to come up with another follow-up podcast of this. But been a great conference at the Digital CPA. Great job at the EICPA and CPA.com, and met a lot of people here and friends and colleagues. I don't always like coming to these conferences because it's pretty overwhelming for me. Sometimes it's easier for me to be here in this closed space than with a bunch of people. Even though I present myself as an extrovert, the introvert part of me gets very much drained at it. But it's been fantastic, well run, a lot of good learning, I think consistent with mine, which is helpful for me to say that when I give messages out there, are they the messages that are maybe shared by those in the space that I respect, such as the keynote speakers I just mentioned. And I would say that's been confirmed here, and that's a great thing. So Emergency Pod, I am going to see, probably my eyes will have to get adjusted here because this closet also doesn't have any lights. I've seen this before. I've seen Will Arnett for, I think, Smartlist he had a closet space. I think he had it buffered for sound. This is not buffered for sound. And Adam, my producer, is amazing at making sure the sound is top-notch quality. But I thought, why not? I'm here. I got space in the room, and I wasn't excited about this conference, and I think I wanted to put that excitement into a podcast. So thank you. Now, if you listen to my podcast for this CPA Intelligence and Ethics show, you might be saying, where the heck are the rest of that Wirecard series, which is a great story on ethics, and I've put the first 3 episodes. I will make it a point to get the next of the episode to conclude that series. If you were a cliffhanger listener to that story, which is a crazy story, just trying to create some time for myself. It's always a challenge. But I want to say thank you for listening to this CPA Intelligence and Ethics episode about the digital CPA, but really more broadly about AI in the CPA profession and how things are changing. So thank you for listening. And now I'm going to leave and find more space and light as I enter the room and get out of this smaller space. Thanks, everyone.